All right, next up, we have an awesome panel with a bunch of really awesome people on it. I'm not going to go through every name. They'll introduce themselves, I'm sure, but this is the DAOs Past, Present, and Future panel. Oh, wow, there's a lot of people in this panel. All right, I'll let you all just go ahead with your panel.
Great, take it away.
Hey, everyone. Hey, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. So we have a great panel on DAOs. Obviously, we've come a really long way from the infamous DAO in 2016, and you know, we had a pretty exciting couple of years in the DAO space, and I mean, the future of DAOs seems quite bright. So you know, before we dive in, maybe we could just do some brief intros. A lot of people from DAO ecosystem here today. So maybe, because you're right here, Aaron, if you want to briefly introduce yourself, we can kind of do that and then kick off with some interesting questions.
Thanks so much, Pri, and great to be on the panel with everybody else. I'm Aaron Wright. I'm the co-founder of OpenLaw. We've been super deep in the DAO space and have helped put together 2 DAOs. One's called the DAO, second one's called Flamingo DAO, and there's new ones that are coming down the pipeline, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about today.
Awesome. Nichanan, do you want to kind of briefly give an intro?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Nich, and I'm a summoner of MetaGammaDelta, which is a what started off as a sorority meme DAO that's focused on supporting and funding women-led projects in the Web3 space. Glad to be here today.
Awesome. Sam, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here in a different capacity than previous ETHDenvers. So my name's Sam Cassat. Probably most notably, I was Chief Strategy Officer of Consensus from the beginning of it and basically built the venture studio there and led investments into stuff like Truffle, Infura, MetaMask, etc. I am now working on a project called Aligned Capital and a general umbrella of things called Aligned. I believe that alignment and incentive alignment is the fundamental structure that allows much of the technology we build to work. And one of those things is a DAO that I'm building in partnership with the OpenLaw Aaron Priya community. So excited to talk about that as well.
Really excited to hear about that. Spencer, do you want to also give an intro? Love the swag in your home too.
Yeah. So I'm Spencer Graham, and it's exciting to be here as part of this awesome panel. As I'm sure we'll talk about, DAOs have been a really important part of my experience in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm a member of Raid Guild, and then I've also been helping DaoHaus to create a platform for more DAOs to be created by communities.
Great. And Chris, yeah, last but not least.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Chris Furlong. I am the co-founder of Mint Mobile and Ultra Mobile. But in this world, I'm a DAOist, and I am one of the founding members of both the DAO and Flamingo.
Awesome. And Chris has really kind of been in charge of like the NFT group of the DAO. So it's been kind of really fun learning from you too. So awesome. Maybe we can kind of kick things off. So I want to go a little bit deeper. I think everyone in the audience, fingers crossed, is pretty familiar with DAOs at this point. I don't want to go too into the weeds there, and there are different types of DAOs. But does someone kind of want to just at least like level set and talk about like this difference between like permissioned and permissionless DAOs? Like what do we really mean by a DAO, and how do they like kind of exist in DeFi, NFTs, and in all different realms? So I mean, I know that's a pretty open-ended question, but I'm kind of curious where people stand there, and maybe Spencer, I can kick off that question to you, and if someone else has anything to add, like feel free.
Sure. Yeah, the DAOs are pretty big. a pretty wide space. There's lots of room for different types of DAOs. I guess. So in a sense, I almost don't know where to start. Maybe I can start with the types of DAOs that I've been focused on more. And that's been more in the permissioned DAO space. So, and I almost think that there's a distinction, there might be a distinction in what the letter A in DAO actually stands for between permissionless DAOs and permissioned DAOs. Permissionless DAOs might be more closer to actually more autonomous, where it's really incentives that are driving the whole thing. Whereas in permissioned DAOs, maybe I don't know what the right word for A is here, but it's more of a community and bringing people together and creating a space for that community to thrive together. That can look like a lot of different things. Raid Guild is a Web3 development co-op. DaoHaus is building a product and a platform formed as a DAO. And there's, as Nish already described, MetaGammaDelta is kind of a club or almost a sorority and doing lots of different interesting things. So I guess I have a ton else I could say, but I'll stop there and give other people a chance to weigh in.
Yeah, definitely. Aaron, I mean, I know you've kind of thought a lot about DAOs from a legal structuring sense. Like, where do you kind of see permission versus permissionless DAOs here, and where do they fit in what situations, and how do you think about DAOs in that context?
Yeah, I mean, I think Spencer is absolutely right that DAOs are really broad mantled, just like other forms of organizations, right? You can set up today, a company to sell T-shirts. You could set up a company to manage a technology project. You could set up a co-op, like we just heard Nathan talk about, which are super interesting and have lots of use cases. DAOs are under that same umbrella. I think the reason why people are interested in DAOs is that the nature and structure of the internet is different than what we've seen before, and we need a new organizational form to capture that activity. At this point last year, I think folks forgot about DAOs, right? There was the DAO itself, which was pretty awesome. Vitalik wrote about DAOs in the white paper. Folks in the EOS community, and we're also excited about DAOs because Dan Larimer would talk about DAX and other things way back in the day. But we didn't have the technical tooling to really start experimenting with things more. And now we do, with great platforms like Aragon and a lot of innovation around the Moloch DAO and the Moloch smart contracts. We've been able to start to experiment with a whole bunch of different formats. Whether or not they're managed by algorithms and are autonomous is always going to be a vexing question that ETH heads are going to be debating forever. But at least at this point, we're able to have more participatory structures that are flatter. And increasingly, I think they just feel like swarms. So I think the native structure on the internet is a swarm, and a DAO is a really nice way to capture that. No manager, people that are chipping in together and trying to achieve some sort of purpose. The other area that I think is notable around DAOs, and this is where there's been lots of innovation, is you're able to pool assets and actually deploy those assets now. Whether that's deploying it to workers so that they could work on really cool things, or deploying that for investment purposes, we can now experiment with that. And that, I think, is why you've seen this explosion in growth in DAOs over the past year. We thought last year if there was about $100 million in DAOs, I think that was the number we put in when we did a DAO panel. We thought that would be a success, and there's nearly $1 billion now being managed by various different DAOs with tens of thousands of folks that are participating in them. And these open-ended structures, I think, are really the future of not only the Ethereum ecosystem and other blockchain ecosystems, but really the endpoint for all organizations over the long run. I just think they're going to work better, faster, and be able to kind of capture the energy of the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and like to your point, there are different use cases, different verticals, if you will. For example, the Lao is primarily is like this hive mind venture-like living organism that's supporting different projects in the Ethereum ecosystem. Flamingo, similarly, is in the NFT space. Sam, I'd love to hear a little bit. I know Neptune's not live, but I'd love to hear about this particular use case from you. and why a DAO is a kind of an interesting method, because for the most part that function of providing liquidity is centralized. So it's interesting to take a hive mind approach there.
Yeah, so obviously liquidity provision is basically the thing that market makers are doing, right? When they go on exchanges and they ask you for 50 million bucks of your token in order to market make it for you when you launch it, et cetera. And I think over the summer, as I imagine many people around here did, I spent a lot of time sitting on the internet all night looking at liquidity moving on chain into into different protocols, and that was really inspired by Andre and Yearn Finance, and that's essentially, you can think of that as a big DAO that's a big liquidity pool on chain. And not only that, but what we saw was, as Aaron pointed out, there's this sort of emerging cyberspace, right, that we've been talking about for decades. But if you think about really abstractly, there are liquidity pools, there are actors, there are market makers, et cetera, that now exist in this sort of like cross-border, abstract space of the internet, and they interact with each other. And sometimes they even sort of get into wars with each other, even as we saw where like Yearn, sucked the liquidity out of other platforms, or Sushi sucked the liquidity out of Uniswap, et cetera. So I saw this sort of like space opera of liquidity wars happening in cyberspace. And I think there are a lot of people who wanted to experiment with that, and a lot of people who wanted to interact with that in a number of different ways. And I saw an opportunity to almost sort of collect individuals from the Ethereum ecosystem and the blockchain ecosystem generally together, and be sort of ambassadorial in that, and be sort of forward-looking and think tank-like in that. I think it's on the little spinning Chiron thing down there for the Twitter handle, actually. So what I wanted to create was basically a liquidity pool on chain that can do those kind of things, help founders bootstrap their liquidity, help maybe negotiate deals in the governance of these liquidity protocols that are maybe having like political contentious relationships with each other. Whatever it is, I sort of wanted to build a community-centric ambassadorial entity that is a liquidity pool that is in the form of a DAO. Where we can kind of, if you're a founder and you want to fair launch something, or you want to, provide liquidity to your protocol, we can help you do that. If you're an investor and you've invested in something and you want to make sure that project is successful, we can help you do that. And we can also, basically do anything on chain that requires a giant liquidity pool, which we're building right now. So that's kind of the motivation for it. And I think that's sort of, maybe a little bit more private and nimble than a giant billion-dollar liquidity pool. It's a little bit smaller than that. And I think it occupies a market niche that is needed. And I think we'll see lots of stuff like that, of DAOs of all sizes and shapes and intentions, as some people pointed out.
Yeah, and it's been pretty, interesting to see that success with Wire too. This is almost like that approach, but a little kind of more community driven in some regards, although that's pretty community driven. I mean, member driven, if you will. And I guess on that note, Nisha, I'm kind of curious to hear about. So I mean, I've been following MetaGammaDelta for a bit. I'm curious to know, as a DAO, how have you guys thought about, participation, how evolution? I know it kind of happened, if I'm not mistaken, through maybe even ETHDenver. I feel like it may have kicked off at some point. So I'm just curious to know, how it evolved and where you guys are thinking about going too.
Yeah, so MetaGammaDelta did start at ETHDenver at around this time last year. It started off where three women met at ETHDenver, and they were about to join MetaCartel, and they had noticed that they were pretty much the only women who were in the room pretty much, and they just had this idea about why don't we just spin our own DAO that's focused on getting more women in the space, getting more women involved in DAOs in particular, and with the mission of supporting women co-founded projects and funding them. So it went from those three kind of initial members to now we have 56, I believe, on Moloch. So we've concluded our first round of grants last year, at the end of last year, where we gave over $20,000 in DAI to 3 women co-founded projects, which spanned from the media space with the Defiant, NFTs and artists with data art, as well as DeFi with a project called Good Ghosting. And all of those projects are led by members who are in our DAO. So I think that was like kind of the first big milestone that we reached as a DAO, despite having only been around for 1 year. So it's grown pretty quickly, and we've been lucky in that we've got a lot of support from existing members in the DAO ecosystem, like people from Metacartel and projects who are also looking to make the space more diverse. Yeah, so now we have weekly meetings where we've intentionally made the barrier to entry very low. So our pledging amount is 10 DAI, because our intention is to include people who have had so far limited exposure to the blockchain space. So we want to get them, introduced into like a friendly atmosphere where you don't need to spend a lot of money to be a part of the community, and you can start off by attending our meetings and getting to know the women and the projects that they're a part of. Because we have leaders from projects in the blockchain space, as well as people who are from the traditional finance space who have expertise in other areas. So we have like a repository of information and member expertise that people can kind of look to find resources. And that's beyond funding. That's kind of the value that we want to give to our members. So it's certainly evolved a lot, and I'm happy to have been a part of that MGD was able to give our first round of grants last year. But in terms of evolving, there's been some like operational growing pains in terms of gas price. For people who are pledging for the first time to spend 10 DAI, they like sometimes the gas fees to submit a proposal to join is like over it's like hundreds of dollars, right? So I think operationally, layer 2 is gonna play a big role in DAOs moving forward. Not all DAOs would be like suitable for layer 2, but I think for things like social clubs, like we are right now, that's a pretty viable option. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, no, the growth of what you guys are doing so far is pretty incredible, and I love the mission, and it seems like a lot of project founders are actually kind of spinning out of this in many ways. I think Good Ghosting is a great example. So I guess on that note, I mean, like, the growth of DAOs over the last year has been tremendous, both just with community and members, but also financially. If I'm not mistaken, there was like $10 million locked up in DAOs maybe like a year and a half ago, and now we're almost close to $1 billion locked up in DAOs. I mean, I think that growth has been just tremendous, and I'm kind of interested. I mean, I know, Chris, you've been, a member of the LAO and Flamingo since day one. What is it like actually being in a DAO, and where do you see the future of this really going? I know both DAOs are pretty, different in mission, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience there.
Sure. I'd start by saying it's been absolutely wild. Both the experiences of the LAO and Flamingo have been well beyond, I think, what the expectation was. Going in terms of the group of people that are involved there, the opportunities, that are presented in both those groups, but then, the fact that the LAO and Flamingo have kind of taken a leadership role within the space, and within a short amount of time have generated goodwill and respect, and been able to pay that back. I think that the networks that we have and the members that we have and what we're willing to do, both for each other internally, but for projects out in the space, founders in the space, artists, creators. It has been phenomenal. Like, for someone who really enjoys tinkering with the product side of the universe and getting, into the formational aspects of, hey, how could you do this? Being a part of both of these groups, it gives you a huge amount of opportunity, both to learn, to absorb, and then, take all these things and try to spin them around and push them back out there and, help the whole space advance. And so, when I got involved with the DAO, I was like, hey, this is a good way to, meet people within the Ethereum community and get connected with some projects. I didn't really think that it would be like an end destination in some respects for me. I thought, oh, I'll do this, it'll be something I do on the side, and then, I'll find a project and I'll join that, or I'll do another startup in the space. And, I'm having so much fun participating in the DAO and in Flamingo, and, it's really somewhere between like a very serious hobby and a part-time job. And there is no real distinction between them because you're having so much fun and you're finding fulfillment there. So it's been great.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I'm kind of curious actually on that note, like, where do you've been a part of the DAO Flamingo. There's going to be more DAOs in the future. Where do you really see this going? Like, what's really the future of all of this? I mean, like, are we going to be seeing like DAO nation states? I mean, that's kind of meta, but I'm kind of just, as a member, like, where do you project the future of these type of living beings to exist on the internet?
Wow. I think, what Aaron talked about with the power of the hive mind, I do believe that is the real advantage of DAO structures, is that, you are acting as one entity where everyone is contributing into like the synthesis of what a DAO is doing and then pushing that out in the world. And a strength of that is not only, can you call on a bunch of really bright minds, but you can also hide your own weaknesses, and you don't really have to feel like, oh, I have to overcompensate, or I have to be out there in a place that I'm not quite comfortable, because the DAO has your back. And so this hive mind, it really forms these a very powerful network, and I think that's really what's going to propel. There's a ton of stuff on the structural and the operational side that, someone like Spencer or Aaron can talk more about. But just, I think as a way of thinking, that's where the real advantage is. And then once the tooling is out there to act upon that, who knows where it can go. But I think we've shown, an ability to scale and to take on really big ideas and projects. But we also get into the nitty gritty. Some of our conversations, deepest conversations in Flamingo, or most lengthy conversations, involve minting, art blocks at, 0.1 ETH a piece. And so, it's all over the place. But sky's the limit.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think that's right. It's this hive mind approach. I mean, it's like the internet. There's so much information, particularly in the blockchain ecosystem. It's so hard to synthesize it. It's so hard to know, whether there's an opportunity, whether there's you're getting the right information, and we can't do it alone. So these legacy structures that are presumed that there's going to be one or two venture capitalist partners that are going to be able to sift through the wash of information on the internet and make superior decisions, I just think that's falling away. And what we're building is just a broader concept around how to make decision-making democratic, quick. It runs a little bit like the internet, rough consensus, not, formal processes and structures. And I think that's going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And I don't think it's limited to investments, right? Like what Spencer's doing around sourcing work is super fascinating. And I think as the token economy continues to grow, it's only going to become more important. Sourcing liquidity, like what Sam was saying, I think is really going to be also a really important thing, because how the heck do you know if a project's legit? most people can't even process the smart contracts. Even if you're pretty technical, you may miss something. You're not an auditor. You may not be able to identify that, but a hive mind may be able to do that. So I think at this point next year, it's going to be completely vertical. If we were thinking $100 million at this point this year, and it's nearly at $1 billion, the closest analogy I think is DeFi, right? We saw it ramp up in 2020, and I think that DAOs are going to be a huge story when we come back here at ETHDenver for 2022.
I just want to throw in there that, like, in the really abstract, DAOs are a part of the digital commons, right? In the abstract cyberspace of reality. So, like, right now we're more on the like non-A as an autonomous side of the spectrum, and human beings are doing a lot of work. But as this evolves over time, I can see these things getting larger, and Tesla cars owning themselves and paying for their their existence, et cetera. And those things may be plugging together. And I think these are the money Legos of coordination that will probably get more complex and more diverse over time.
Chris, you should mention Alien DAO. What your thoughts are there?
Wow. Yeah. So Alien DAO is really kind of pushing the limits or the theoretical. I don't know. So Flamingo bought or acquired an alien, a CryptoPunk alien. There's only 9 of them. One of them hadn't changed hands in 2.5 years, and our group, we were able to come together and get it. And the idea is not to treat the alien as an NFT, as a possession, but to give the alien agency, to provide him with a wallet so that he can become an active citizen out in Ethereum. And that the alien's ultimate goal is to achieve his own sovereignty. But in the meantime, there's going to be a hive mind of people behind him, helping him on that journey as he explores all the opportunities that are out there in the world of Ethereum, not just in art, but in governance, civics, politics, and then the whole DeFi world. It's almost like if you took a blank slate and just threw that slate into an emerging world, but with 50, 60 incredibly intelligent people powering that. It's really an experiment, and I think we're all looking forward to see what happens there.
All right. Thank you all so much. Did you have any final words, Priyanka?
I guess just some last words here. The future of DAOs are bright. I think everyone talks about progressive decentralization, and that's all what we're all here for here at ETHDenver. And I think DAOs are going to be the coordination mechanism in order to achieve that. So really, happy to talk to everyone here about, DAOs and past, future, present. And so, yeah, let's go. 2021.
Awesome. Woo! All right. Well, thanks everybody on the panel for joining us. And great job, everyone. Don't even know what to say. DAOs are just such a big deal. I can't even grasp it all. But anyways, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.